everyone. Welcome to our broadcast today. My name is Jessica Payne. I am Director of Community Programs at the Bar Association. We are excited to have another Thursday where we are broadcasting directly. Our main focus today is on the law students. We know this is a tenuous time. I'm sure you keep hearing that. Of course, more people are welcome, but the reason that we're broadcasting mainly to students is to give everybody the opportunity. We can't do it in person like we would like to of coming to your law school, but we want to give a lot of an open dialogue and a discussion about areas of practice, opportunities for careers within those practice areas, your career paths, anything and everything that's important to you now, and especially at the time of the pandemic crisis and how your fields are being impacted. We want to help keep you on track during the shutdown and keep learning about career opportunities. So with that in mind, we are very excited to bring together a variety of speakers. Today, we have two panelists planned. We're hoping that our second will be able to join us in just a little bit, but we'll get started with our first panelist. We have our focus on employment law to begin with, and we have got our first guest speaker. I'm so happy you could join us. He is Matt Besser. He is an experienced and accomplished negotiator, litigator, and appellate lawyer who fights for individuals in employment discrimination, constitutional and civil rights cases. Little bit of background about Matt. He has awards for professional excellence and community service. So I'd encourage you to look him up on his website for his firm, Bolek, Besser, and Glesius, for more inspiration. But before founding his law firm, Matt worked as a law clerk at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. As an appellate lawyer, Matt has authored many briefs and successfully argued numerous cases before the Ohio and federal courts of appeal. Many of you may know Matt from his time serving as an adjunct law professor at Case Western Reserve University School of Law, where he teaches appellate advocacy. But we at the bar know Matt best, and mainly through his service as director on the CMEA board, where we very much appreciate his time and his efforts in guiding our organization. So Matt, if you want to say hello to everybody, hopefully that was enough of intro, but please feel free to supplement if there's anything else you think people would want to know.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jessica. Hope everybody's doing well out there.
Yeah, we'll hear. I'm sure we'll hear lots of questions, hopefully, but yeah, I echo that as well. Hopefully everyone's staying well, enjoying a little bit of the snow, but now that we have sunshine, because yay, Ohio, of course. So sort of diving into what we are hoping to speak about today, it's more of just a general discussion. And again, please, anybody with questions, please go to the bottom of your screen if you're participating by Zoom. There's a little button that says Q&A. You can enter the questions. We on staff will see them, and I'll be happy to direct them to our panelists, and we can get into discussion. We really want this to be interactive. We'll have more of a dedicated Q&A time after we've had the chance for Matt and I to speak a little bit, and hopefully our second panelist can join us, but please don't be shy about joining at any time. So I wanted to kick it off, if I could, Matt, with just sort of a discussion of your practice, a look at, what a typical day is, what you do. We'll get into a discussion more about how you got there, but if you could give us just sort of day in a life, if you want to choose pre-COVID, and then we can talk about how that's changed. But what has your practice generally been like, if you could give us all an idea?
So let's assume a non-pandemic world. We represent individuals in employment cases. That's everyone from factory workers, blue-collar workers, to C-level executives. It's mainly discrimination, harassment, retaliation type cases. The single most frequent issue that we see involves health issues in the workplace, which is relevant for obvious reasons now. Typical day is discovery. Our cases are very discovery intensive, like most other types of civil cases. Very few of them go to trial. And another big part of the day is talking to potential new clients. We get a bunch of calls a day, especially now, of people who have been let go or having issues at work. And the reason I highlight talking to new clients is because I started my practice at a big firm, one of the big firms downtown. When you work at a big firm, it's billable hours, right? How much money are you bringing in because your clients are typically businesses and they pay by the hour. On this side of the V, folks typically don't have money to pay by the hour. So we work on contingency. And when you work on contingency, there's only 3 outcomes. You win, you settle, or you don't get paid. So we really need to screen our cases very carefully. That unfortunately means that we have to turn down the vast majority of people who seek us out for help. And that's extremely difficult at times. But it also is very important, because if we don't pick carefully, then, you know, we're going to go out of business. We can't help anybody. So that's, you know, an ordinary day in the life in a non-pandemic world.
Okay, you know, I'm actually getting a message from our second panelist, Craig, that he's having a hard time getting in and talking. So hopefully our communications team can get in touch with him and see how they can make sure that he can join us. But in the meantime, I would love to hear a little bit more. So at the risk of all of us revealing our ages, which some people are shy about, can you tell me how long you've been out of law school? I know, I can't remember if I mentioned earlier that you are a case law school grad.
I'm not a case law. No. I'm an Ohio State grad.
Oh, I'm going to get emails about that. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm a Buckeye, but I taught at Case. I taught law school.
Okay.
I taught practice at Case. I graduated in 2004,
Mm-hmm.
and I spent a year clerking on the Third Circuit, which covers Pennsylvania and Delaware, New Jersey, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And as I said, I then worked for 3 or 4 years at a big law firm before I joined the plaintiff side. There's Craig. Hey, Craig.
Hello.
Hi, Craig. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, apparently you had me in as an attendee, but not a panelist. So.
Well, we're really glad that you could join us. To catch you up to speed, that we've had the chance to talk a little bit with Matt about his history, his career so far. But we're starting this talk, just kicking off and talking about our various practices. And you know, we're going to talk a little bit more about your career paths and then how things have been focused after, you know, in the time of the pandemic. So if I may, I would love to give Craig a little bit of an intro so that our viewers can understand where he's coming from. I'd love to say that, you know, Craig is also a leader to whom we owe so very much the bar, as he chairs our cybersecurity, data privacy, and emerging technology section. I'd love to say outside of his practice at Walter Haverfield, Craig also serves as a senior director and executive committee board member of the Federation of Defense and Corporate Counsel. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a national organization of elite civil side defense-oriented litigation and trial attorneys. Craig, as well, is an adjunct professor at Case Western Reserve School of Law, and he is a winner of the university's prestigious Newton D. Baker Distinguished Service Award. Now, this is where I got confused. Craig is a Case alumnus. I got in trouble with Matt a little bit ago, both for law school and undergrad. And it's amazing his practice has taken him to most of the states in the country so far. And he's had the chance to speak on legal topics in Europe, Asia, and North America. So I'm a little envious of that travel schedule. Craig, if you wouldn't mind jumping in and sort of telling us a little bit about what your practice is like. We've done a little bit of, you know, day in the life.
Yeah, in general, I think you kind of captured a lot of it. I have a practice focused on complex litigation in different bits and pieces of my career. I've spent large chunks of time with insurance coverage, with particularly patent litigation and related fields. So it's been a pretty busy development over time, business litigation, things like that. But when I began to see the growth of AI and other aspects of technology as it affects the practice of law, I'm a firm believer in get on the freight train or else it's going to leave you behind. So I started learning about cybersecurity and picked up a few things here and there. And the next thing you know, I'm involved in cybersecurity law. as well as emerging technologies. So that's a short story of it. But over the years, it's been a lot of different places, a lot of different litigations, and pro hac vice, for this case only, as they say, admissions in most states around the country for different purposes.
Right. So Craig, what have you seen is trending in your field? Let's still keep it pre-COVID. What have you seen in recent times, either in your practice or as you've seen as chair of the section?
Well, as it relates to COVID, some of the biggest issues are business interruption concerns, obviously, and as well, how do you cancel a contract? What clauses mean in contracts that we used to overlook, not overlook, but we didn't take with a whole lot of meaning until COVID came along, and that's the force majeure clause, which is almost an act of God type of situation, but it's the clause that allows people to cancel contracts because of acts beyond their control and or forces that are major beyond their control. That's a big part of it. And in cybersecurity areas, there's an inevitable, every time you move one step one way, the hackers try to keep up and move another way. And part of it is a number of different scams that are out there and trying to lure people to give up information so that they can open themselves up and subject themselves to a hack.
Yeah, of course. I actually just today got a notice from my bank saying, please don't click on anything that isn't coming from us. You know, that the IRS is not going to be asking you for your login information in order to send you your stimulus check.
Well, that's
Other
right.
than scams that are sort of your run-of-the-mill phishing scams, what else have you seen that is of concern in the cybersecurity arena?
Well, even such things as that subtle, these different quizzes that are going on in social media, Facebook. We've all seen them. You know, what high school did you go to? Have you ever ridden on a train? What's your favorite pet? What was its name? What high school did you go to? Hey, put up your high school picture. A lot of that stuff is actually founded and started by scammers that are used to then take that data and use it and keep a data storage on an individual or a corporate representative in particular, so that it can be used in different ways to elicit information that could get into different account information and hence money.
Matt, what about you? What have you seen trending either just before all this started in employment law, and then I know we can think of the obvious things that have changed in terms of employment law once the pandemic has hit, but I'd love to hear from your perspective what you've seen.
Are you talking pre-pandemic or current pandemic?
Why don't you take us through what you saw just before the pandemic, and then just sort of so we get a sense of what normal looks like beforehand, and then what it's looking like now.
Yeah, the most common claims that we see involve health issues in the workplace. So employees with health issues needing medical leave and either being denied medical leave or being retaliated against for seeking it. We see a reasonable amount of pregnancy discrimination cases, age discrimination cases as the workforces get older, and sort of general workplace whistleblower retaliation. The other thing that we are seeing an increasing amount of involves non-competition agreements, restrictive covenants for employees, even in jobs where you might not expect it. You know, sort of hourly wage worker cases.
You know, I've been wondering too, as I've seen this happening with the COVID, how in a lot of cases I've seen employers are able to make accommodations, you know, for remote work, other things to comply with social distancing and the stay at home. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about whether that's going to give rise to a new sort of case where, you know, plaintiffs can say, look, you were able to make these accommodations during the pandemic. Is there anything more that you should be doing now that we've gone back to normal, assuming hopefully we can?
Yeah, it's a great point. The answer is we don't know yet, but I expect.
You can't predict the future? Come on, Matt.
I expect that will be part of cases in the future. So when we talk about accommodations like telework, employee leave, those arise in a couple different contexts. So they arise in pregnancy discrimination cases, where the rule generally is that employers have to treat pregnant employees the same as they would treat non-pregnant employees who are similar in their ability to work. So the comparison we often see is a pregnant employee who needs leave versus someone who's got maybe a back issue or a heart problem. Does the employer give leave to one and not the other? And the other context is sort of the converse, is leave in the context of employees who have health issues. So reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the question in those cases tends to be, is the request for leave reasonable? Is it doable for the employee, for the employer? And then the employer would have a defense of undue hardship. These are obviously very strange times. And, often by force, employers have to give leave because they have to be shut down, or, it's an essential business, but because of social distancing, they've got to let their employees telework. I don't know yet what sort of a return to normalcy will look like when we get into disability discrimination cases and the accommodation is leave or telework. Whether we'll be allowed to use this time period as an example of what's possible, who's to say? It's certainly something we'll be looking at if and when we get back to normal discrimination cases.
Right. So I'm going to take a step back, just keeping in mind who our audience is and where they are just at the very beginnings of their careers. And I would love to hear from both of you. I know we got some of the bare bones of your path, but if we could get a little bit more touchy-feely, I'd love to hear things about, what were some of the challenges maybe that you encountered? And Craig, if I could start with you just to cue this up, over your career path, thinking back from law school graduation and then each of the stages that you went through, what were some of the challenges, the roadblocks that you encountered? What are some of the ways that you overcame them? And then what were maybe just some of the rewards of your career throughout its path that maybe you didn't expect along the way?
Wow. Okay. So we have a week to talk about all
Any
this
little
stuff,
question.
right?
You have 5 minutes, now go.
Right. Yeah, right. In 3 seconds or less. I've been doing this for, a long time. I graduated Case Western back when dirt was invented and they were just coming up with the idea of using fire. So it was 1982. It was in the middle of a recession and there was a hiring freeze on at the time. And it was in some ways, although nowhere near as the magnitude of what we're dealing with here, but there have been different recessions and or situations in the past where there's been difficulty in getting jobs and such like that. And what you really have to do is set yourself apart in different ways. And so I had to work when I was in law school. I had to support a lot of what I was doing out of my own back pocket. And in that process, I wasn't able to write for law review. And so I got involved in a writing seminar in my third year. And I was able to use that to get that training that is so critical for law firms and for that matter, agencies and employers who are looking to hire people, to see that those young lawyers, the law students who then take the bar and pass, are trained in the basics, i.e. how to cite cases, how to write. It's amazing to see the difference between people who aren't trained in that way and those that are, because as a senior attorney or a more senior attorney who's depending on associates doing work, you're looking for somebody to do and put down on paper what you're looking to see and not having to correct cite forms and things like that. And so I went through that training in law school in getting published. And I wound up taking the paper that I had written and getting it published out in the UCLA Journal of Environmental Law and Policy, which then showed on my resume I had that kind of training that you needed. I also did a little bit sort of avant-garde things. I applied for and moved out to LA for the summer of my second or third year and took a job in a law firm out in LA, which actually I was told in my third year got me an interview and a few interviews, because people are like, if you got the intestinal fortitude to up and go somewhere else and work at a law firm in a different city, that showed a little bit more moxie than someone who waited for the future to come to them as opposed to going out and seizing it. During the course of that summer, one of the things I did, and it also, if you will, set me apart, was I didn't wait for partners and associates in the law firm to come to me. I'd knock on the door and say, hey, what are you doing for lunch? And I'd ask them questions. And as you just asked me, people love to talk about themselves. So I listened and I learned, and I went through some of the legal directories at the time and figured out who was from Cleveland, who was educated at Case Western. And I called those people and took them out to lunch, or at least asked them to take me out to lunch, if you will, and made a bunch of connections. And the next thing you know, I had a couple of different job offers from firms in LA, which I parlayed into using as leverage to get job offers here in the Cleveland area and in Northern Ohio, which is where I wanted to be. That's just an example of coming out of law school. And at different times in your career, you got to keep your resume current. Every day you do something else, put it on your resume. And then eventually you'll take that kitchen sink resume, the resume that you got, the CV that has everything you've ever done. And if you're applying to a position in corporate, or you're applying to a position in employment law, you can then pick and choose all the different things from that resume, that kitchen sink resume, and design a specific resume to the employment law firm that you're going to go talk to, so that it looks like, geez, this person really has some experience and some background in employment law. And remember that if you do one thing, it can be used in many different ways. So if you're involved in a litigation support role, well, and it involves all sorts of data input and other things, you can use that in a tech type of world. You can put that down and couch it a different way. It's how you spin it. But be honest, most of all, but use and look into your past and see what you've got that you can put a proper spin on and be honest about, that can make you look set apart from your colleagues and your competitors. Because quite frankly, at the end of the day, you got to get a paycheck and you got to get that job. And it's really important to work that way. And if you don't have the luxury, and I say luxury, it takes a lot of hard work to get great grades in law school. But if you're not at the top of your class, you're not getting the book awards, you've got to do something to set yourself apart. And you got to find it in your own background in ways that make you as unique as anybody can be to get that job, that starting position, and then use it to leverage into other things. Also, always be curious, always take a speaking opportunity. And if someone offers you a chance to write, as much as it's frustrating, you want to go out for those softball tryouts for the summer leagues, you want to do these other things, you got to focus on what your career is going to be. And so take that writing and opportunity, and maybe you blow a weekend, but you got to do what you got to do. So set yourself apart and don't be afraid of a challenge, because it's those challenges that'll help you grow. And change is constant. Accept it and embrace it.
Yeah, you have a lot of good things that you mentioned that I think apply in this circumstance. I mean, of course, we're speaking to, this is a unique class of graduates, or, you know, people just seeking work now. You mentioned sort of similar times that you can sort of understand being let out of law school during a hiring freeze, and that certainly would provide its own challenges too. But it also sounds like you're talking a lot about that flexibility that is really important, and that creativity. And I would say as well, yeah, that seems like something that hopefully our law students now and our new practitioners can take and apply, because you're right, you know, we may have internships available in the summer. It's looking less and less likely that the regular schedule of how we do this is going to proceed as normal. So I think you're absolutely right that trying to be creative is going to be good. I would be remiss
Hey,
if
Jessica,
I didn't yeah, please.
One last thing, if I could, and that is the 2008 recession, which was probably the most awkward time it was in recent years to find a job for people coming out of law school, which is perhaps the most similar to our situation today. For the classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022, reach out to somebody who might be an alumni of your school who graduated in 2008 and 2009, and talk to them about what they did and how they got themselves into their career path, because that's a tremendous resource of ideas that these students and those of you who are listening today can tap into as far as getting themselves launched into their careers today.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an amazing point. And sort of to that point too, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, speaking as people very clearly we care about the Bar Association, we believe that this is a really, really good way for you to make those connections, find people, fellow alum, of course, go through your schools as well and use those resources. But more than anything, when we get ramped up again, the volunteer season starts again, late summer, early fall. You can join sections. You can join the Bar Association for free as a law student, reduced rates depending on how long or little time that you've been in practice. Use and exploit all of those opportunities. Because I feel the same way that you do, Craig, that a lot of it is connecting with the people who want to help you and have seen your situation, want to help you get that next foot forward. Matt, do you have anything that you want to add?
It's all about networking.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And that was harder for me in law school. I didn't want to go to all the different events, and you're right, I wanted to spend my weekend doing something else. But it really does come down to how do you meet people in unusual ways and set yourself apart, like you were saying. Matt, I would love to hear about your path and see if you have any lessons for our audience going forward.
Well, I'll be brief because I'm sure folks want to ask about coronavirus legal issues, but the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome was learning humility. You know, you come out of law school, especially if you have, some success in law school, and you pass the bar and you got all this knowledge in your head, and it's real easy to sort of think you know everything. And it took me several years of embarrassing myself, falling on my face sometimes, putting my foot in my mouth, before I sort of learned that there's a lot to learn. And there's a lot to learn from experience, even if you think that you might be maybe a little smarter than the person who's older and more experienced than you. There's a difference between intelligence and wisdom in a lot of things, but that is especially true when it comes to the practice of law. And so much of being a lawyer is interpersonal relationships and social dynamics, and that's just not something they really teach in law school. So learning that lesson, sometimes the hard way, was probably my biggest hurdle in wading my way into practice.
Sure. I mean, I can't believe it, because you are humble and a delight, Matt, but that's really good advice to give. If we could take a quick side journey, and we got a question in from a law student who I will say I won't share the student's name, but I know that the student is already, I know, on the right track by coming to one of the volunteer programs that I help run. But we have a question where she has said, my summer associate internship with a big labor and employment law firm just got canceled. Where can I look for alternative internship opportunities, and what are the chances that law firms will hire new attorneys? Now, again, I know I'm kind of asking you both to predict the future, but based on what you see in your firms, what you've heard from others, do you have anything that you would want to share with this student?
I'll throw that to Matt.
Sure.
It's an employment-oriented question.
Well, when I came out of law school, it was a boom time. So, almost everybody was able to get a job. So it's very different. But, as an adjunct professor, I have taught students who are graduating through the recession in 08 and 9 and 10, and seeing good students, even students at the very top of their class, struggle. And I remember when firms were stopping their summer hiring practices. what I can say sort of long-term is the jobs will come back. Firms will start hiring again. I don't know when. In the meantime, find a way to make the best use of the time that you can. That might mean an unpaid internship. It might mean doing something that's a little bit atypical, working for a nonprofit. Find some way to try and put your legal education to use, even if it is not what you were hoping to do, so that when things do come back to normal, you'll have something meaningful experience-wise to show for your time. But the one thing you don't need to do is panic. The legal jobs will come back eventually.
I think Matt's
that comes
right.
back to your point. Yeah, please.
No, go ahead, Jessica.
I just want to say, I think that comes back to your point about being creative about what's on your resume. The law students you're all coming out in a time where it is going to be common that it's not going to be the clear track that we're used to seeing. So whether you do land at a nonprofit, an unpaid internship, whatever it is, it seems to me, Craig, that goes back to your point about being creative and being able to spin that in a way that matches what your prospective employer is looking for.
Well, absolutely. And frankly, Matt's point is very well taken, and that is to set yourself apart, because if you look at the rest of your class that you're graduating with and multiply that out across Northern Ohio, you got Toledo, you've got Akron, you've got Case Western, you've got Cleveland State. And if I've left somebody else out, I apologize, but those are the big four that are typically involved. And so expand your class out to those four. And that's your Northern Ohio competition, basically. And look at that and do something that is going to set you apart. And frankly, I know a lot of us have to, you've got to earn a paycheck, whether it's that landscaping job that.
Oh, we seem to be frozen.
Another job that you can do. Go ahead, somebody else. But
no, Craig, I was just saying it seems like the internet connection we have is a little bit spotty. So we heard the last part was that landscaping job or not.
Oh my, that's a while ago. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. It seems to be good.
Okay, so it's, oh, wow, hang on, I get a notice here about remote desktop, blah, blah, blah. All right, so yeah, but while you do need to earn income, obviously, and in some way, shape, or form, take your evenings and your weekends, take your time or time away from when you're working, where you normally complacently maybe watch a Netflix show or something, and use that time to advance yourself in ways that can help. Either do this kind of a thing, take webinars, do something to set yourself apart so that when you do get an opportunity, you can leap on it that much more effectively. And at this point, you're not in a point where you can be picky at this point in this market right now. Some people want to wait for the ideal job to come to them. They might be waiting for.
Craig, I think that we've
There's
got
a lot of inertia now
again.
as, okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's the technology of the day.
Yeah.
Wherever the market picks up, there's going to be inertia. In other words, the momentum that they had going into this is now reversed, and it's a slow market now picking up until it does, as Matt put it. The jobs will come, but in the meantime, you've got to be willing to do things perhaps that you wouldn't have been so interested in before to get into the marketplace and get that first job.
Craig, we've got another question from one of our viewers, and this is more directly related in your line of work, talking about cybersecurity. But Matt, you may know as well if you've heard anything. The question is, are any Cleveland firms looking into the data privacy issues surrounding contact tracing software to track COVID-19 spread?
Well, there is a woman whose name escapes me currently, but she wrote an article just before this COVID thing hit. And literally we were talking to her, for instance, and the privacy issues associated with genetic testing. And the big concern at that time was if people get into your health history and can find that out and then use that to apply leverage on insurance premiums, health insurance issues, deny coverages and things like that. And so she had a very interesting article. And I think you're going to see more of that coming out of this whole COVID thing, especially with the discussions they're having regarding these potential IDs that people who have had it and may have antibodies for it will have to carry around, or that those of us who haven't had it yet may have to carry a card that says, I don't have it yet. That's a huge constitutional and privacy issue regarding how this startup process back into the economy is going to happen before they get a vaccine in a way that prevents it from hitting any of us. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think you did, but if we know of anything else local, sort of treating that
I kind of think I did, but I would encourage the students who are listening to surf the web and find articles written by people that look like it strikes you as being particularly of interest, and then reaching out, be proactive and reach out to those people and say, hey, how can I help? Do you need somebody as a research assistant? What can I do? And that may, again, help pull you in to something that's going to be pretty relevant as we move into the next several months.
So looking ahead, again, I know we can't see the future, but I'd be interested in hearing from both of you. What has taken you by surprise in your respective fields in the last several weeks of dealing with the pandemic and the shutdown? Was there anything that you didn't expect in your field of practice? Matt, I'll start with you if you don't mind me tagging you in.
No. No.
You can see the future. You did see the future 6 months ago, and you're utterly unsurprised.
One of the great things about practicing employment law is that you sort of lose your capacity to be shocked. You see sometimes the worst of people. We do everything up to and including workplace rape cases. So we see some nasty stuff. But I would say that I have seen exactly what you would expect in terms of the continuum of employer and employee responses. Now, keep in mind that nobody calls me to let me know that they aren't having any problems, right? No one calls and says, my employer went above and beyond for me.
Matt, I'm going to call you in 3 months after this is over, and I'm going to say things are great. I'm going to give you that call.
But I will say that I have seen employers accommodating employees who needed it. So one issue we've seen a couple times is we represent a lot of healthcare providers. And, these folks are humans just like the rest of us. They have their own health issues, sometimes health issues that make them vulnerable to the virus. And so if they work in a high risk exposure job, that could be particularly dangerous for them with their underlying conditions. I have seen some healthcare employers who are not giving their employees a hard time and are shifting those doctors to, say, telemedicine. I've also seen healthcare employers going the other way, threatening to fire employees who raise issues about workplace safety and the lack of PPE. So it really has been the full spectrum of what you might expect of human reaction to a earth-shattering pandemic like this.
Craig, I'd love to turn to you. Have you seen anything that has surprised you or that you weren't expecting in your field?
Well, a lot of what I've been involved with has been, as I've moved deeper into a more mature role in my career, I've moved into more of the Bar Association leadership type role as you mentioned earlier, with that Federation of Defense and Corporate Counsel, Board of Directors, et cetera. I'm also on the Federal Bar Association board and a local chapter here in Cleveland. But what we're seeing is the reaction has been so deep. And many times I think a lot of us felt that this was going to be kind of a surface type of run and we'd see how it went. And it's been absolutely throughout the deepest parts of the economy. And that has been, I think, a deeper surprise for many of us who've been around the block a few times to see that this is, it's worldwide. It's not limited to one little area. And it's there's no region that the other regions of the country are rushing to support because everybody's in this together. This is a moment in history. And I said this to my law students when I teach as an adjunct at Case Western, that the students of today, the 20, 21, 22 grads, are going to be seeing things in the future. And I said this last fall somewhat presciently, my gosh, you're going to see things you can't imagine and that will develop in your field, in your career, and you're already seeing it now. None of us, I don't think, imagined it getting this. And that's been probably the biggest surprise of all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Is there anything that you have seen, anything that's changed in your practice during the time of COVID that you hope continues as we move back to our new normal? Or you could take beyond your practice, even in just your personal life, anything that you've seen happening in these past few weeks that you think, you know what, I hope we keep.
So that's Matt.
Sure, we'll start with Matt, and then I'd love to go back with you, Craig.
No, I'd really like us to get back to a normal life. As I said at the outset, the single most common issue that we deal with in normal times is employee leave for health issues. Now take that and multiply it by the entire economy. That's what we're dealing with, the scope of that. Everybody's got concerns about workplace safety, about leave issues, about unemployment. So it has been a deluge of people needing help. And, we're helping as many as we can, but the scale of this is really tough to process. And, as I look out my window, there's a UH facility across the street from us. I can literally see a line of cars around the building of people waiting for tests. And, I'm a parent of young kids like everybody else. I'm kind of sick of being locked in my house. I'd love to just sort of wake up, take my kids to school and get to the office, drink a cup of coffee and put in a day's work of defense lawyers stonewalling me.
Craig, what about you? Do you think we want to stay exactly as we are, or have you seen anything in these past couple of weeks that you would hope to take forward into the future?
I would think, in light of what was the norm a month and a half ago, that you're not going to see certain things treated in, for instance, in negligence in corporate or in other entities such as governmental negligence. You'll see more extensions, I think, of sovereign immunity. I think you'll see greater creation of immunities that'll be extended by courts and/or statute regarding how people reacted to this almost, frankly, in our lifetimes, unprecedented situation. And I think you'll see some changes as a result of this going forward in some very significant ways. I do think, though, that there's a lesson that's being heard across the country in corporate rooms and in law firms that we can work remotely. We've invested a great amount of capital in this economy, even though we're shut down, in opening up opportunities for people to work at home. And I think that that's a welcome thing for disabled. I think it's a welcome thing for women with children or men with children, whatever it might be, to open the door for opportunities that didn't exist or were frowned upon before. And I think that's a welcome thing. It's a good thing moving forward.
Yeah, I would
Absolutely.
agree. Yeah. We just got a question in that I think is a very interesting one. And speaking as employers and you know, people who might have some say in hiring on at your respective firms. So as you know, there's a serious risk of the bar exam being postponed or possibly canceled for a diploma privilege. And we have, our questioner is wondering, what are employers' general perceptions about working with graduates who are working under a diploma privilege or some kind of supervised practice requirements?
I could answer that a little bit, if I may.
Please.
We just had a board call for the Federal Bar Association, and representatives of Toledo, Akron, Case Western, and CSU's law schools were all on the line. And some of our people are liaisons with the Ohio Supreme Court and have pretty good information. Ohio is probably not going to be extending a diploma privilege, but what they may do is, and it's all up in the air right now, and this is hot off the press as of 5 o'clock yesterday or so. They may look at the clinical relationship that third years and second years have in working in supervised situations until they can open up the doors for an actual bar exam in person or however they decide to do it. But we are not in Ohio going to follow Utah's lead with this diploma privilege type of thing where people are going to be out unsupervised practicing law without having passed a bar. That's just, I'm reporting to you what the reading of the tea leaves by people of greater knowledge in the area than I have are saying what Ohio will do. They're taking the lead, working with nearby states to see what collectively these different states are going to do. I know that the Conference of Bar Examiners has put together 2 dates in September where they're offering the multi-state, and many states are looking at jumping on those, thinking that we're not going to have a second spike in this COVID situation, so that we'll be in some degree of more normalcy, let's put it that way, coming the fall in September. But we'll see.
Right.
Every major industry has had major cancellations in the coming months. And now those cancellations are reaching into August, for example. So we'll see what happens.
We had a follow-up question on that. What about an online exam, and would employers accept an online bar exam?
Well, the question isn't really will employers accept it, it's will the Supreme Court be willing to do that. And if Supreme Court puts all the law students, the third years, into the same boat, and everybody's in the same boat, employers, I don't think, and Matt, maybe you'd have a better response than this, but everybody's going to have to look at we're looking at the same pool. And if everybody in the same pool has the same background as far as what of blah blah, I think employers are going to look at it and say, okay, now we have to pick through the crop based on what we're given. What is the market, and what's the supply, and how is it defined?
Great. Matt, anything you'd love to add to what Craig's been saying?
I would just say that you know, in all my years of practice, I've never had anybody ask me what I scored on the bar exam. I don't think it's a very controversial statement to say that the bar exam is not a great predictor of your ability to practice law. It's a test of minimum competency. So, you know, if I were looking at hiring somebody, a young lawyer, I'd want to know if they passed the bar because the Supreme Court requires it. But, you know, in the order of factors that I would look at in hiring, you know, whether someone passed the bar outside of the requirement to is not in the top 10 factors. If the Supreme Court allows online bar exams, great. I think it's important to allow these law students who are graduating to get out into the workforce as fast as is safely possible. And if that means changing the way we give the bar exam, let's do it.
Well, and to that point, Matt, many of you students who are listening know as you approach the exam period of your time in school that these schools are putting together the ability to proctor exams online in some ways that were unforeseen before. And that technology, that ability, those apps, those software programs are becoming open to bar authorities and putting together these bar exams. And, you know, if you're thinking about a July bar, there are decisions that are going to have to be made, and the Supreme Court of Ohio, for example, will be making a decision in the first 2 weeks of May as to what's going to happen with, if you will. I know that that's not a whole lot of solace, but stay tuned for a couple of weeks, and I think we'll all find out pretty quickly what's going to happen.
Great. We have just a couple minutes left, so really quick, Matt, if I could start with you, share with our law students a reason or two why they should absolutely not go into the field of employment law, and then more reasons why they absolutely should.
Oh, the reason why not to is easy, and it's the emotional toll that it takes. You know, I've heard people describe employment law as sort of mini divorces. Outside of family law, I'm not sure that there are too many more emotionally trying areas of law to practice. And it can be very hard to protect your heart in these cases, whichever side you're on, plaintiff or defense. They are just by their nature very emotional. So we're talking about someone's livelihood on one hand versus being called a racist or a misogynist, or, as I said, I've had rape cases, a rapist. These are intensely personal and emotional cases. And the psychological toll it can take on you if you're not careful is a high price to pay. The flip side is, you know, they can be very rewarding cases. At least I have found on the plaintiff side, it can be very rewarding to fight for a cause that you think is just. And sometimes you're helping families get their lives back in order. I've had few better feelings as a lawyer than being able to give a big check to a family that I knew would be able to use that to send their kid to college or to secure their future. And that's tremendously rewarding. So that's one reason not to, and one reason to.
That's pretty convincing. Craig, how about you? What's a big reason they should not follow your footsteps, and a bigger reason why they should?
Not to, if you want to get a 9-to-5 job.
Oh no. Craig, I think we're losing you again.
Probably not what Matt's done. Okay, hopefully not. But if you want a 40-hour week, don't take this path. But at the same token, if you want the excitement of having the opportunity to be involved in so many different things, I've been on top of a blast furnace. I've been on top of I've been in a basic oxygen furnace room. I've been in a wire making plant. I've learned about diode and LED lighting. You know, you just keep on going in different areas, and you learn so much. As I had.
Oh, well, for those of you who had technological issues on your Zoom call bingo card, congratulations. I do want to be respectful of both of our speakers' time and all of our audience as well. So we are getting close to 5 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap it up. Gentlemen, thank you both very much.
Thank you, Jessica.
The audience found this very interesting. I know that I really did. So thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. We're getting some thank yous from our audience as well. So we really appreciate your time and your insight. If you have any follow-up questions for us at the Bar Association or for our panelists, I'm volunteering you, you have no choice. You can always please message us either on Facebook Live, or you can email me. It's jpayne, P-A-I-N-E. So jpayne@clemetrobar.org. We will follow up and hopefully get you the answers that you need, or if not, we will see you again next week. We have some exciting news about who we have speaking. Once we get that all settled, we will make sure that everybody knows. So thank you for your time. Enjoy the sunny but very cold weather outside, and everybody stay safe and healthy. Thanks very much. Take care.